Good evening. Welcome to the Village Board work session agenda for Monday, July 28th, 2025 it's 6 p.m. or it's actually 6:01 now, and we're here in the Village Hall boardroom. Megan, would you take roll call, please?
Trustee Wojka?
Here.
Trustee Banoski?
Good evening.
Trustee Mishler?
Here.
Trustee Briggs?
Here.
Mayor Domeretz?
Here.
And our student advisor, Xander.
Here.
Great. I'm going to skip over the guests because we'll introduce them in just a moment or two. Trustee Banoski, would you do the land acknowledgement, please?
Sure. Before we begin this evening, we would like to recognize the Seneca Nation on whose ancestral territory we are gathering. The present-day village of Fairport sits on traditional Seneca land. The Seneca Nation, with the Mohawk, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Tuscarora, make up the sovereign Haudenosaunee Confederacy. With respect, we acknowledge the people of the Seneca Nation on whose land we now live. We honor their past, present, and future contributions to and stewardship of this land.
Thank you. The next thing, it's not listed on the agenda, but the next thing that we're going to move to is Citizens Forum. So if anybody has signed up over here, we'll try and get the police to keep the noise level down during this part. But if anybody signed up, please, Megan, if you want to call the first name on the list, or maybe Mrs. Frank is the only person on the list tonight, please come on up. We ask, I know you've heard this a million times, try and keep
It's okay.
your comments to under 5 minutes and be respectful.
I will.
And everybody in the room, please be respectful.
My name is Margaret Frank. I'm at 44 Park School Drive. I wish that the Citizens Forum had been on the agenda. I think a lot more people would have talked, and I would have brought something else. But mainly what I want to say tonight, and I don't think he's here yet, is just to thank Chief Barnes for 25 years of service. There's a lot of knowledge that's going out the door. He was a great chief, great officer for many years. So that's really all I want to say tonight.
I think he's in with hearing range.
Okay.
He just heard you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Anyone else who's here who wanted to share any comments? Okay, come on in, Luke.
I have to say my name and all that.
Yes, you do, for the record.
Luke Wells, citizen of Fairport, New York, 9 4th Avenue. Many years ago, when Chief Barnes wasn't the chief, he got a 911 call. He responded quickly. I know that because he responded to my house. And my wife was there, and I was there, and he said, I got a 911 call from this phone number, so we invited him in, and as soon as he looked down the hall, he said to my wife, I can see the perp from here. It was my 4-year-old grandson. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Luke. Okay, without seeing anyone who wanted to get up and speak, I think that will take us to new business. So one of our guests this evening is Chief Matt Barnes. And so, Chief, can you step in the room? And I know you have some people here with you in the room. Come on in, and we'll have you come up to the microphone, but don't talk yet. We as a board just wanted to thank you for your service to this community. We have something to present you in thanks for your time here in the Village of Fairport. And we all, and I believe a lot of people in this room, wish you the best on the next chapter of your life. I'm going to come over and give this to you.
Okay.
And then if you have anything that you would like to share, as long as you keep your comments under 5 minutes, we'll let you speak.
Thank you, Mayor.
I just wanted to say thank you. And this is for you.
Thank you.
Because we would hate for you to forget where the Village of
There we
Fairport
go.
was. Good to see you here, Sam.
Mayor.
This is for you from the board, and thank you. And look, smile you. and
Appreciate it,
hand
Mayor.
the camera.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
you know, we want to say thank you to you. And
Appreciate
I know
it.
that you are never short for words, so please feel
Yeah.
free to.
Tonight I'm going to be short on words. So just thank you. All right. Thank you, guys.
Words of thanks. So don't exit the room yet.
We're good. You guys have a meeting to conduct. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, well,
Thanks for these guys for coming.
we're thankful that everybody joined to send you on the, like I said, the next chapter of your life, and we thank you we have a lot of gratitude for your service to this community. So thank you.
Chief, if you mind if I just say one thing? I really appreciate you always taking our calls. The smallest questions, the biggest questions, you took them all. You never made us feel silly, and you gave us time. You always answered our emails, and it just is very, very much appreciated. You're going to be missed. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you to all the supporters who came to support Chief tonight. Okay, that was a lot faster than I thought it was going to be. So that will take us to our next agenda item, which is the draft zoning code presentation. And Planner Jill Weidrich is here. And from Fisher Associates, please come on up and introduce yourself. And Jill, who's going to work through the overview? Okay, that's great. Come on up. Chris, I'm forever not remembering your last name, so please.
Chris Kushel from Fisher Associates.
Thank you.
How do I advance the slides? Do I just need to
Those folks are going to help you with that. Does that help if he points up there or at the computer?
page? All right, so thanks for having me back. It's been a while, I think, since I've been here. So we've been certainly very busy. So the purpose tonight is, as the phrase to start, to introduce this draft code that we've been working very hard on. So my thought was I would give a sort of a brief recap of what we've done to date, but very brief, and then really just kind of go section by section, but it'll be very high level. Obviously, we're dealing with a fairly dense 200-ish page document. And so, but then if you have specific questions, you can feel free to ask Jill or me.
So can I ask one question
Yeah.
before we get started? So Jill, I know we have these books. Would you explain to everybody up here how we can follow through this with the presentation, or should we? Just because all of us just got this, so I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Sure. So how it was organized is the tabs, there's 15 articles.
Okay.
So there's 15 tabs. The draft code doesn't divide very well for tabs, so I did my best. So you'll see that you might have to flip a couple pages. What Chris is going to do is he's going to go through the high level of the draft, and then you've got the summary, you have the comparison, you have the map. And so once Chris is done with the presentation, then we're happy to chat about different elements that you've reviewed thus far.
But we'll also have time to go back and kind of absorb what you've shared and
Correct.
share more comments in the future.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I think, I don't know if it's the next slide, but one of the slides I have, go to the next one. Yeah, here we go. So this is really intended tonight to be sort of the kickoff of the code, certainly not by any means the end of the code. And so this is to introduce you so you kind of help sort of organize yourself in terms of the organization of the code, and then you'll take your time to go through it. We'll be presenting this to the public. I see that there's a fair number of people here tonight. We will be having a public forum in August, and that this presentation I'm giving tonight is essentially going to be that same presentation at that time as well, and that's when we'll be gathering feedback from the community, and then refining and finalizing this code. So we still have a number of steps to go, but we are at this point sort of nearing the end of it. I gave Jill a sort of a marathon analogy, which I hope resonated with her, and it certainly does with me. But I said we're kind of at that last 10K when everything's really hard, and we just have to kind of push through it and hope that we get there. So one of the things that we have been doing, we've come to you all with a number of areas that we needed your input on and your direction, and these were some of like the big pieces, and I'll kind of show how those got quote unquote operationalized into the code itself. A lot of what we've been doing is all the other parts to this code. There's a lot to do with process. There's a lot of just minutia, everything covering from fences and how open they need to be, and regulating porches, and so many aspects that go into this legal document. We've met several times with the zoning working group. That group really kind of dived into the details. I just want to sort of take a minute to commend them, because this group had really, I thought, robust conversations. The group didn't agree on everything a lot of times, but the conversations were very respectful, kind of tried to find consensus where they could, which was great, and I'm really juxtaposing it to some of my other projects. So I think that is just something just to commend the group. And then,
Can I put you on the spot and say, can you name the members of the zoning working group?
man,
Jill, can you help them?
I'm afraid I'm going to forget some, so I'm going to have Jill do it.
I just think we should recognize them for the amount of work that they've helped you with.
Right, well, we do have some of them here, so if you'd like to raise your hand, we have Kara Myers, and she represents the Historic Preservation Commission. We have Jamie Maywison from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I do not see Yana Goronsky. She's from the Planning Board. We also were lucky enough to have Joe Bavenzi, who's with GTC, Genesee Transportation Council. We also had Pat Gooch on there, who is the leader of planning in Monroe County for the county. I feel like I'm missing someone. Mark Lenzi, who's not here this evening, and he's obviously our code enforcement officer. So as you craft a code, one of the things that you are always checking back with your code enforcement officer is, can you enforce this? We don't want to just write code for the sake of writing code. We want to make sure it's enforceable. So the zoning working group put in a lot of work, a lot of effort into this, a lot of reading, a lot of drafts, a lot of good conversations. So thank you to those that are here. And I see a lot of land use board members here as well, so I know they're excited.
Okay, can we pause so I can say thank you? Thanks. I appreciate it.
And we should also thank Jill, because Jill has read this document multiple times. And again, it's a very much an iterative process where we realize, oh, we have to add something here. We should reorganize it this way. So there's been a lot of work. So even though we haven't been here for a while, we haven't been, twiddling our thumbs either. So if you go to the next slide, just to bring it back, sort of what even brought us to this project. You all developed your comprehensive plan a few years ago at this point, I think, and this is sort of the next step. So in many ways, this was thought of as a continuation of that process, because a number of the goals that were developed in your comprehensive plan are impacted by the zoning code. And we knew that in your existing code, a lot of areas were not well aligned, in addition to the fact that there were other just issues with having a zoning code that's decades old. And so, one of them, just if you go to the next slide, just to give an example, land use was one of your areas of goals. Within your comprehensive plan, you had a number of goals. Within each goal, you have different recommendations. And so we talked about some of this before, but a lot of those could be traced directly to what we tried to implement into the code itself. Next slide. In terms of engagement, we did our best to put a lot of effort into reaching out. I presented this before, so I won't go through all of those bullets, but we tried to get the word out, to get community input through as many means as possible, so that people were aware of it. If you go to the next slide. And then that was sort of getting the word out, and then the actual sort of events that we had done. As you all know, we had a number of in-person forums. We had these quote-unquote office hours that were held at the library that people dropped into. We had a booth at the farmers market where we spoke to a number of people, did some walking tours. We had online survey. And as we go now into the final stages, we'll be repeating some of that with another open house style forum. We'll have the drop-in office hours again as well. And so there's still continued opportunities for people to provide their input. All right, next slide. So here's the overall organization of the code. So it's divided into 15 different articles. There was as I just mentioned, there's a lot of organizing, reorganizing, adding articles, taking away. And the hope was to have this be logically organized, organized also in the sort of what is considered the best practices today, because obviously that's evolved over the number of years since zoning codes have been adopted. We put a distinction between the sort of shaping the form of the buildings and regulating the uses. Right now it's sort of predominantly about uses, and we tried to really balance that out because both aspects are important. We also were trying to think longer term. So we know that there's going to be changes to this code, new uses are going to come up, new technologies that need to be addressed, et cetera. And so the hope is that this code can be amended relatively seamlessly. Obviously, nothing's perfect, but we did the best that we could so that in the future we can change things relatively easily. So we also tried to employ what we consider best practices. So traditional zoning codes, they're very sort of written in a legal-esque type of way. So we've, the best codes now, obviously they have to hit a certain standard because this is a legal document, but we try to use more concise and clear language. We make use of number of tables, which was lacking in some cases in the existing code. We also incorporate a number of diagrams that are intended to help explain the text and supplement the text. So next slide. So I'm going to go through, obviously fairly quickly, all of these provisions. And in some cases I've bucketed them. But so Articles 1 and 2, your general provisions, a lot of this is sort of boilerplate type of language that has been included. It also has your purpose, and so that's a number of bullets that are intended to really set the stage of what's inside this code and to try and connect it explicitly to the goals of the comprehensive plan. The second article is the definitions. What we have done here is separated kind of general definitions from use definitions, and I'll explain about the use-related definitions in a bit. This article it's really important and critical, especially for somebody like Mark, also for Jill, as well as the other land use boards. So we spend a lot of time just on what are the definitions we need to include and how are they actually described. In some cases, including diagrams such as the one example there about how roof building height is being calculated. Next slide. So then we get into what are the zoning districts. So Article 3 really basically just lists what these districts are and describes them. If you go to the next slide, so the image of the map that's on the left, that is the proposed zoning code and the zoning districts. The one on the right is your existing code to compare it. And when we have the open house, we'll have both of these so people can sort of do a comparison side by side and see how they look and how they're different. If you go to the next slide, so some of the takeaways of what these zoning code, these districts are, we've simplified them. So there's fewer districts than what you have now. We found that there were not a lot of differences in some of the residential districts, and the character was such that they could be combined from the regulatory perspective. There was at least one obsolete district that was no longer needed, so we removed that. We have better connected the downtown district. Before it was sort of more two distinct islands, and so now it's a little bit more seamless. And this isn't really affecting the policy so much, but I think it does sort of speak to the intent of the code where we've renamed them. So rather than the traditional use-based districts that are something like an R1, a C1, et cetera, we're trying to name them a little bit more related to what is the character of these different districts. And if you want to jump in along the way, feel free. But if not, I'll just keep going. Oh, yes.
What district was obsolete that you took out?
It was like Village
It
Landing.
was like LCR or
but it
something
was-
like that.
So LCR doesn't exist anymore. LCR was a combination of some residential and some commercial. The Landing Development District no longer exists. That was an urban renewal district that expired in 1994. We also, design overlay doesn't exist anymore, but we'll talk more about why it's not necessary going forward. And then we got rid of RB 3550. Which was just maybe 10 parcels. Neighborhood business no longer exists because you can see on the previous map, it's one parcel. So we looked through and we said, okay, what makes sense to ensure that we're capturing all the characteristics of these properties and not having a bazillion residential districts. So this map, I think it's probably a little bit difficult to see, but there are 3 residential districts, and they don't vary a lot from the existing in terms of we've got currently our A, our B, our C, our D, our E, our B 3550, but when you look at residential in itself, there aren't changes to it, if that makes any sense. So you can't see that third yellow color very well, but I promise you when I upload it, it will be better.
I laughed because I know what that neighborhood business is. It was over on High Street. It was Felix's Market, and then it was Pizzeria, and then it was a haircutting place, and
Now it's residential.
now it's residential.
Next slide. So then Article 4 gets into what we're calling the district standards. And so we have, the way it's organized is we have a section for each of the districts where we give a basic purpose statement for this district, and then we provide some of the basic bulk standards that would apply to that district. We then have design standards that are applicable to the various districts, so within residential districts, then commercial and mixed-use districts. There's additional standards on top of that for the canal district. Then there are some standards for the industrial district. Then we talk about accessory structures. And then finally, the planned development district option. So this article, in my mind, is really focused on the physical form of the buildings and what takes place within the districts. Yes.
I have a quick question because I did actually read beyond this place. And in the list of unacceptable materials, is that the right chapter? It's got lists of
Yeah, I think that's in
unacceptable.
here, yeah.
It calls out vinyl, and I'm guessing that to not be vinyl siding. Is it vinyl siding or is it some other version of vinyl?
Yeah, we can go back
Well,
and
in
check.
townhouses, it says no vinyl, no plastic.
And when I mentioned earlier about design overlay district currently that we have, it covers basically the downtown districts. And
Sure.
that prescribes the materials that can be used, how the facade has to look, et cetera, et cetera. We went further and met the desires of the community to have design guidelines, or standards rather, for all uses. So there's ones for industrial. We say we don't want mirrored glass. We want buildings to look like they belong here. The feedback that we got is people love the way Fairport looks, so why not create code that's supportive of that? So rather than just have it on a couple of parcels, it's now spread out throughout the entire community.
And all I was looking for was the definition of vinyl, because it just says vinyl, and I'm like, I'm not sure I know what you're indicating with just the word vinyl.
And that's a great example of why we want this feedback, because we have looked at it so much that we need to have the fresh eyes, and so we can go back and
Okay.
check and make sure that we're clarifying that kind
So
of item.
I'll ask that you take a note on that, and
Yeah.
I'll send you an email with all of these comments
Perfect.
afterwards. But as reading through it, I'm like, I'm not sure exactly what they mean by just the word vinyl. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Chris,
next.
just a quick comment.
Yeah.
In this section in particular, the diagrams become very helpful, which I'm assuming that those diagrams were lacking from the previous one.
Correct.
These were,
They were not.
they made it super clear. And there's a diagram for every single section of this, so that's wonderful.
Thank you. And this is just an example of those diagrams of the bulk. So again, they're intended to be very sort of simple, but just help explain what is there to supplement the text, just to make it more clear. And so one of the just note I would say is, and this is a good example of this iterative process where we had these, what is the setbacks, the side setbacks, the rear setbacks, and the front setbacks. We realized, well, you know what, there's what you have for your principal structure, your house, your main building is probably different from what you want from a shed, right? You don't care as much if a shed's a little bit closer. So we've added more nuance here to distinguish, and that's an example of something that was missing earlier in one of our earlier drafts, and then we added that back in. So just want to note that. If you go to the next slide. So then after those bulk standards, we get into, oh yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Yes, wanted to check as I've been reading through those bulk standards. Have you had a chance to stress test them against maybe the smallest lot in that particular zoning district to make sure that we haven't created rules that aren't possible?
We did look at that. We looked at what are your actual. So what we did not do, I'll start with, what we did do was look at what are your lot sizes, for example, so that we are capturing, because you had a lot of non-conforming kind of lots, and same thing with the front setback. So we did stress test it in that way. We have not sort of done an actual sort of build out of the existing of lots, which we could probably do pretty simply, I guess, to just to check to make sure that we're not creating some undue hardship or impossibility of development.
I mean, I guess really it was just a quick sort of pass the giggle test type of thing, right?
Yeah, and
Looked
we
at
did-
it
we've
and said,
done
okay,
that,
the building footprint on our smallest lot appears like at least initially it would work without having problems.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely, we've done that, yep. And so then it sort of builds on it where those are like the broader standards, and now we're getting into more details of design standards. And as I mentioned first, we have them for residential districts, and so there's different ones for single and two-family homes. There's other standards for townhomes. With the intent, as Jill mentioned, is really to have buildings that are compatible with the village, and sort of not mimic or copy them, but to ensure that they're sort of in harmony with them. Next slide. And then downtown, one thing we did meet here was related to building heights. And so what we had talked about was 3 stories is generally appropriate. There could be options or opportunities for a 4th story, but when that's done, there needs to be ways to sort of soften that additional height, and there needs to be criteria, which we've included on when that is appropriate, things about like what are the adjacent buildings there, what are the vistas and views, other impacts that might have on the street in that certain location. And so the planning board would be the body to assess that and either approve or deny that. Next slide. And then there are design standards as it relates to the commercial, mixed use, and multifamily buildings to, again, ensure that we're providing the right kind of clear guidance for developers and to ensure that the future development fits within the sort of the context of the community. There's requirements for how pedestrians get around to make those connections, both within a site if it's a larger site, as well as connecting to the right-of-way, to the streets. And this is where Jill had mentioned there was the previous design overlay district. We've essentially sort of taken that, which was in many ways advisory, and applied it now as required standards. And we've taken elements from that, but really added on a lot of additional requirements that we've brought in from other precedent examples. All right, next slide. Then this article gets into the accessory structures. So again, there's a lot of things that are just, if you want to have an accessory structure, there are general requirements, and then we have more specific requirements for certain structures, such as garages and sheds and swimming pools. And this is an example where, again, this is intended to be a living document. If there's an issue that comes up in a year and we decide we need some requirements for, I don't know, some other type of accessory structure, there's sort of this logical place where we can add it in here relatively seamlessly. We have a list of prohibited accessory structures, and again, that list, which is quite small, but it could be added if there are certain structures that are causing problems within the village. Next slide. And then the final part of this is the planned development district. So this is something, and we can talk more about this, and Jill can come up and help answer questions, but it's essentially a means to allow for when you have large parcels. So in this case, we're restricting it to, it has to be at least 8 acres of land to allow for a more flexible sort of opportunity for development to ensure that we have a type of development that is unified, that is really meeting the needs of what the village wants, to provide some flexibility because the standard zoning maybe shouldn't apply in every single aspect to the here. But there's a very high bar to follow or to meet if you if anybody actually wants to do a PDD, because it actually has to be adopted by the village board. So there would be its own full process. The provisions within this article have lay out all the steps, all the requirements. So there's quite a lot. So it's intended to be flexible, but also not intended to be something that is used, willy-nilly at all by any means. Is there anything else I should say about the PDD, Jill?
Tracy has a question.
Okay.
8 acres or larger, what, do we have any properties that big now that this would apply to?
Yeah.
I believe there's about 5, but the provision says that you could also combine properties and apply as one application. But again, as Chris mentioned, this is not something that somebody comes in and just says, I'd like to write my own zoning district for my uses. It's a heavy lift. And I think the important part to remember is it's something that has to be reviewed for recommendation by the planning board, and then it comes to the village board for final approval or denial. So it is a process.
But it's good to have a process. And
It's good to have a process.
before something like that comes in and somebody says, I want to do this. You're like, we don't have
Correct.
any process.
So
for
if there
this."
is a large parcel of land and for whatever reason, it's time for something else to be on that property. And let's say the property owner has this unique idea that doesn't fit into any of the zoning districts we have or any of the uses. They have an opportunity to go and create that section of code, and it can include not only allowed uses, but also design requirements. So it can get very lengthy. I think they're really cool. I've seen them be very successful, and they bring a lot to when communities use them. So you're not going to see it on the zoning map. It's an option there, so it's an additional process.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide. All right, so now we're up to the uses. So here we have the use article. As I mentioned, we're not getting away from uses. Even when you use the term form-based code, they still always have uses. I think, I can't remember if I used it here, but I gave an example where you're not going to allow a nightclub in a quiet residential area just because the building looks like a house. Like we care about uses still within our community. And so this article is divided into an introductory section as per usual. Then we have a big use table, which, again, that takes a lot of time, where we thought through every single use, what's appropriate, where, obviously building off what you currently allow today. Then we have standards for not every use, but many of the uses. And so these are, again, distinct from the buildings, but they're applicable for the use that are requirements that need to be adhered to. And then we put the use definitions here. And again, part of the process is going through every use and making sure you have an appropriate definition. And we felt like it's nice to have it all self-contained within this article, and that's why we kind of brought it out separate from the Article 2 general definitions. Next slide.
Can
Yep.
I add something that I just talked with Jill about and make sure that everybody on the board hears this as well as anybody who might pick this up? So today, the top of the table does not match the proposed zoning map in terms of color. And Jill is going to go through and make sure, because I said, Jill, I had to go like this, back and forth. So these at the top of the table, the colors will match with what the zoning map looks like
And
to
then
make it easier to read. Go ahead.
Chris, I noticed there that in the bottom of page 66, the prohibited uses, car wash, crematorium, drive-throughs, junkyards, and pawnbrokers. We have a crematorium. I can't say the word. Crematorium.
It's not in the village.
I thought it was in village limits.
It's outside the village.
Oh. I thought it was.
The one on Turk Hill?
No, the one on O'Connell.
Uh,
I thought it was. Okay, my bad, sorry.
Okay.
That I was gonna become a non-conforming or something.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So this is just one page of just to give an example of how it looks. And so it notes whether a use is allowed, whether it's by right or through a special permit process. And then if there are use standards, it provides that reference so that you know right away to kind of go to that section. So you can go to the next slide. So one of the things that we did come here early on was really what was the kind of the biggest, most controversial aspect of this related to uses was the question about uses as it relates within the single-family districts. And I had noted before that the vast majority of comments that we had received through the public process was really focused on some issues that, from a sort of content perspective, a very small part of the zoning code. And so at the time, we wanted to really hit that head on because it was controversial. And so I'm just sort of reminding us again that within this 200-page document, if you go just kind of to the next slide as it relates to, there was a question about, so we have a number of homes within what are called single-family districts today that are 2 families, 3 families, and 4 families. And so the question was being raised, do you want and under what circumstances to allow those within these districts? There was unfortunately a lot of both misinformation and just misunderstanding, I think, of sort of what the question was. And there was some thoughts about this being like high-density apartment buildings being allowed in this, which was certainly never the case, but there was a whole lot of nuanced options of what could be done, if anything, here. If you go to the next slide, when we looked at what those little colored dots on the map were, those parcels, and we looked at the actual buildings themselves, what you see is that these homes clearly read in many ways as being similar to a single-family home because in many cases they once were single-family homes. If you go to the next slide, the zoning working group spent hours and hours meeting together to discuss just every different types of analysis and options to think this through. So it really took seriously the responsibility of considering what would happen. These regulations, if you go to the next slide, we had a whole host of different nuanced options which we had brought to you all to get your input. And if you go to the next slide, and then ultimately the decision, which I know isn't a binding decision, but the direction we got from you all was twofold. One, really to limit that opportunity from single-family homes that are being converted to 2-family homes and only in situations of very large homes, 3,000 square foot gross floor area. I can't remember the exact number in the village where that could even apply to, but it was a very, very small number. So on the left, that little screenshot, that is actually all the text. So all that work kind of leads to that amount of text within the zoning code. Accessory dwelling units were another sort of hot button topic that, again, we met a lot and discussed fairly extensively. The zoning working group made a recommendation to the village board, and the direction from you all, again, is what we see there, where they are allowed, but there are a number of requirements and circumstances to ensure that they are the impacts or the potential impacts are addressed head on. So that's that. If you go to the next slide. So that's uses. I just want to spend a minute on that specific use because I knew that was something that had been very much on a number of people's minds. Article 6 then is more site development standards. So these are more general standards that apply for everything. It covers things such as landscaping, lighting, exterior lighting types of issues, fences, refuse containers, different types of HVAC and mechanical equipment, other types of performance standards, meaning like things addressing odors and vibration and noise and all those types of things that, that can affect the community. So we want to control all of those things. And so this is another example where some of this was in your existing code, but we really expanded upon it in many ways. So next slide. So moving on to parking. So this article, it provides the requirements for the amount of parking you need for different uses and in different areas. We provide requirements for bicycle parking, which is new. We provide design requirements for parking facilities, whether they're parking lots, driveways, garages. Again, it's keeping with this theme that we're adding a lot more sort of design requirements within the code, which we hope will help really just ensure that the types of future development really remains compatible with what you have and with what you say you want from your comprehensive plan. And then finally, the article talks about storage of vehicles. So next slide. If you recall, we did do a parking study of the downtown, which we presented some months back, where we looked at the actual utilization of all of your public lots, so that could help inform the recommendations, not only for the zoning, but also beyond that, because I think there were a lot of parking policy implications that the village can take on. But we're also thinking specifically about the zoning code itself. So if you go to the next slide. So for residential districts, we have pretty clear requirements, and this is relatively standard to include your minimum requirements for all of the uses that you can find within these districts. We've also gone a step beyond that and also put parking maximums, which is, again, sort of a current best practice. So it's not just how the minimum that you can provide, but what's the maximum? Because if you provide too much parking in locations, there's a lot of negative implications or aspects to that too, both environmental, cost, et cetera. Next slide. And then for the non-residential districts, it's more a more creative solution. That is, again, really in keeping with best practices, where rather than defining a specific minimum, an applicant's required to basically come up with a parking plan to show here's what the demand is and here's how we're going to meet it. And they can meet it through a whole sort of multi-pronged approach. So part of it is providing parking on site, but then there's all these other opportunities to either reduce parking demand, and they have to the onus is on them to show it, or provide sort of creative options. So as one example is shared parking. So if you have, for example, a church, that parking lot might be fairly empty 6 days a week, they can come up and have another business nearby can come to an agreement and be allowed to use those spaces and not have to provide as much on site. So that's an example of the way shared parking would work. If you have a mixed use development, there's usually different peak demand times. So like a restaurant might be in the evening, whereas a residential might be later at night, whereas an office might be during the day. So depending on that mix you have, rather than it being perfectly cumulative, the requirements, you can, there's some overlap there. So you can reduce parking needs that way. And there's others that are listed within this section. Yes.
Is there any mechanism built into this for ongoing review, enforcement, any of those types of activities? What I'm thinking of is, so someone comes to the planning board and they show, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z to mitigate parking for our business. And then a year later, they're not doing X, Y, and Z, they're doing A, B, and C, which totally is having a negative impact. So that's where my question is coming from. What is the ongoing enforcement or ability for review in the future once someone's come in and met this, but then down the road, they're not meeting it anymore.
I always tell applicants that when you get an approval from a land use board, that it's like a contract. So if you at any point are not doing what you said you were gonna do in that contract, then we're gonna have a discussion. And you either get to do what you said you were gonna do, or you're going to come back before the board and explain why you're not doing what you're going to do and propose something new. So that's something even today we look to ensure that when a land use board puts conditions on an approval, that they're meeting those conditions. So that will just continue.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. All right, and then next article covers signs. This is a fairly extensive article. It's quite long, quite dense. It really covers a lot. There's general standards, which there's a whole host of standards related to signs. Just one example was about digital signs being prohibited, but that's just one out of many pages. There's options for or requirements for a coordinated sign plan. So if you are a multi-tenant building, or if you're a development with multiple signs, ensuring that it's there's sort of a unified look and coordination is required. There's options for an alternative sign plan. So if you want to do something creative that doesn't meet what's in here, the onus is on you to essentially prove to the land use board that you deserve to have a special permit to do something different. There's
Okay, this is something that is, I think, going to be very exciting to a lot of people out there because we're a community that really likes public art. We like things that are interesting. Our current sign code pretty much says it should be a rectangle or a square with a couple of colors, but very boring.
No backlit.
Not backlit, and we're continuing with that, right? We want to have gooseneck lighting, we want to have lighting that's appropriate. But the alternative sign program gives a chance for somebody to be really creative. And the example that I use all the time, if anybody has been to the Village of East Aurora, Taste is a coffee house, and they have a big coffee cup, and there's steam coming out of it, and it says Taste on the side. That's something that you can't jam into your typical zoning code. But if somebody came to us and said, hey, I'm doing whatever, and I want to be super creative and do this really cool thing, now we have a process for that, and the planning board can take a look at it.
That got me excited about signs. Then we also have a list of prohibited signs, and then we have a number of requirements for all the different signs that are allowed. If you go to the next slide, this is just some diagrams, again, intended to just explain what are the requirements and help give a sense for what those signs would be. Next slide. So
I think the diagrams are much easier to understand than that table that's in our current code. That's pretty difficult to understand.
Good. That was the intent. So I'm almost done now. So I'm just going to batch together Articles 9 through 12. These really focus on, now we're getting into like the process part of it. So before we're talking about sort of the what, now we're kind of talking about the how. So Article 9, it covers all of the various review authorities, what your responsibilities are, as it relates to the zoning code, how you're made up, et cetera, requirements related to that. Article 10 covers the actual application requirements, the decisions, how they're rendered, et cetera, notifications. Article 11 then talks about the different types of processes you might have and for each of the different review authorities. Article 12 then covers the nonconformities, which is a really important section. We talked about that. We also talked about this in the context of the existing residential uses where you do have a 2-family or a 3-family within these residential districts, and ensuring that those are sort of set up that they can still operate and continue and be maintained, and provide that pathway for that. If you go to the next slide. So here's just a summary of what's in the code for each of the boards. So the village board covering amendments, preservation district designation, PDDs if that comes up. The planning board is doing the site plan review, the special permits. I won't go through all of these because I think they're fairly standard. They haven't changed much. The one addition I did want to note is we are adding this thing called an administrative adjustment. And I think this is, from a process perspective, a really helpful thing for a community where when there are small deviations from the code or from the standards in the code, the zoning officer can be empowered to, not obligated, but empowered to make a decision on waiving certain minor standards as opposed to requiring the applicant to go to the ZBA and get a variance for something like that.
I was going to say, can you give an example, please?
Yeah, so with the administrative adjustment, there is a notification that happens. We are also notifying the neighbors and giving them 10 days to provide feedback on that decision. It's just a little bit of a smoother process. One of the examples that I think is important to our community is that we're an old community with homes that have different setbacks. And I think the perfect example is on Roselawn Avenue. So we have a lot of those homes, the setback is 15 feet. And our code currently requires, I believe it's 25 feet. And we had an applicant that came and said, I don't want to go for any variances. I just want to get my building permit. So they complied with the code, except now their house is set back significantly from their neighbors' properties. So one of the items for administrative adjustment would be to allow somebody to say, I want to be at the same setback as the neighboring properties. So from a development standpoint, that makes sense. We know we're not going to capture the setback of every property in the village, but we want to ensure that that street wall remains. So that was one of the tools that we used for that. I also want to point out, too, that Historic Preservation Commission has, for its existence since 2007, I believe is the year, been outside of the zoning code. We're bringing them into the zoning code so that they are one of the land use boards, they're one of the team, and so there's more integration between the land use boards because of that.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Did you?
No, I think that was great. I mean, I had a chat with Jill, because as I'm reading through the regulations and the setbacks, if anybody was walking by my house, they'd see me standing outside measuring how far my house is from all the sides to see, what kind of impact, really does this have? And that was helpful to know, because yes, we did simplify the zoning districts. But yeah, how do we address the nuance that are within them in a way that is fair to the neighbors, but also encourages the design within the public realm as you're walking down the street, so it has that just that feel that people enjoy when they're walking around the neighborhood. So I think that's good that we have that there.
Tracy, did you have any questions so far? I'm just, Tracy. Not about this, no. Okay, all right.
Okay, next slide. Okay, then the final articles, these are sort of these special articles that they really didn't fall anywhere else, and so they became their own articles. Attainable housing is something that I think is pretty, exciting to include. I don't know if it'll actually be used all that often because it only applies to larger developments, but what it does say is when you do have a larger development, we set that threshold at least 10 units, then a percentage of them, 10% of those total units, so if you have a 10-unit development, it's a single unit, has to be set at a price that is essentially attainable for what we're calling working class types of wages. And that's being defined as 80% of the area's median income and for a household. So HUD has a sort of a chart of what that actually is, and it depends if you're a household of 4, it's different from if you're a household of 2, but it's set that way. And so this is one of the ways to help achieve the goals within the comprehensive plan of maintaining affordability for the community.
I'm sorry. Just so everybody knows, when we're talking about this AMI, this 80%, for a family of 4, currently from the 2025 HUD statistics, it's $83,000. So we're not talking somebody that might be making $15,000. This is $83,000, and I think a lot of families in our community would probably meet this.
And those requirements are with new development only? Is that
Or redevelopment.
significant redevelopment?
But it wouldn't
So an existing
retroactively,
building that would
yeah.
be redeveloped?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then Article 14 is incentive zoning. So this is in your current code. This brings it in, but makes some modifications, some changes to it. We've changed what added to the incentives or the amenities. So basically, it provides a developer would be incentivized to provide various amenities that would benefit the community. I don't know that it's ever actually been used in the village. It has been used, okay. And so that is remaining as an option. And then the final article covers the enforcement issues. So things like violations where if the code is not in compliance, et cetera, those types of issues that really fall under your building inspector. So with that, I think I am done. Yes.
With the incentivized zoning, where has it already been used? Just trying to understand.
Yup, so it predates me, but my understanding is the condominiums along the canal, it was used during that process.
Condos on the canal. Maybe was West Ave ever? And probably before that was like when all the urban renewal happened back in the 70s.
Yeah, I incentive zoning, I think most municipalities have this provision in their code. Is it used all the time? No, but in some instances, it's good to have that tool. You can look at a zoning code as being a toolbox. And so we're ensuring that we have the right tools to develop the community the way that we want it to.
I was just going to add, incentive zoning was not statutorily recognized until 1992 in New York State.
Then it wouldn't have been
So
under the urban
it was a
renewal.
relatively new advent for the New York State village, town, and city law. New York City, as a general proposition, had been using a iteration of it for many decades, but it was never recognized at the state level until they standardized it. So with that adoption, many municipalities took that standardized statute and then sort of implemented it at the local level, which you have to do in order to use it. The state law needs to be enabled at the local level. So a lot of villages and towns have done that subsequently.
I'm going to go over. Sander, I know out of the blue, is there anything that you've seen that you have a burning question that you're curious about?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. I'm going to check at this end. Not yet? Okay. Anything, Adam, at this point in time?
No, not at the moment. I've been going through, taking little notes and things, but I'll provide those. Some of them are just, questions about like, or maybe this was a typo, no comma here or something like that, but nothing that really warrants a much discussion here.
Okay. I'll go back over at this side again. Any questions at this time?
I've got a lot of questions, but I don't know.
Do you want me to jump in? I have just
Yep,
one
you
thing
jump.
that is at the forefront. There was a lot of discussion, I'm sure, about design standards, especially in our business district. And I think according to our chart, the acceptable height of the buildings would be 3-story, right? And then with a special use permit, it would be 4. Can you clarify, would the 4th story also require a setback? Like it showed in that particular diagram, so that you wouldn't have that like wall effect or sort of that massive side of the building, I think, appearance that could happen.
Yeah, the diagram was intended to convey the actual requirements. So there were 2 different options. It could be 3 stories and then the building steps back on that 4th story. Or it could be that the entire building is set back. And if that's the case, then there's also requirements for what occurs within that front yard to set back to ensure that it's an active space, whether it's seating, community garden, et cetera, things like that. But yeah, those
So
are
is it,
requirements.
I guess, just to clarify one more time, is the 4th story then required to be set back?
No, there's 2 options.
Okay.
The important part of that 4-story, and we had discussed a little bit, I think it was in February that we were here, we discussed a little bit about the different processes that could be employed to have that be a potential. And so the special provisions say you can go this direction or you can go that direction, but ultimately it's reviewed by the planning board. So special permits are contemplated to be a yes, maybe, And so it would ultimately fall to the planning board to evaluate and review if that proposed design made sense and if it was appropriate on Main Street.
I'm assuming maybe that fourth story was something the zoning board working group, right? Maybe, was there a consensus on that fourth story? I mean, 4 stories seems high to me, but I also understand that adding that fourth story obviously creates more units, more housing perhaps, and from a, from that lens, it's a positive. I'm just curious why not 2?
Well, there was a lot of discussion, and I believe, forgive me, I can't remember which trustee mentioned this, but they had mentioned that they had spoken to Bill Perret, who said historically.
me.
Okay. That historically.
I mean, it was a big discussion when the Diane Prince building was, I just remember it was a big discussion. The
Right.
height of our downtown buildings was a big discussion.
Right. It was something that we talked about for a while. One of the things that we elected to do was initially we thought, well, would this work also on Canal District? We elected to not allow a provision for the 4-story in the Canal District, and so you're limited to 3 stories. So I think the 4 stories is a good option on Main Street because that, and it states in our comprehensive plan, that's where we want to see development. If we're going to have the opportunity for somebody to go 4 stories, that's where it should be, that's where it's appropriate. And I think historically, I think it makes sense as well.
I think it's allowed in the Canal District.
Yeah, it's on that chart, right?
So,
It's in-
yep.
It's
Well,
allowed in the pink.
So the,
General
trustee
neighborhood?
Briggs, the document that you're looking at is the one that predates the most recent draft. So we had met with the zoning working group on the draft that you have marked up and said, hey, let's go through this one more time. Let's
Oh,
make
okay.
sure we've got everything. So that is one of the changes. That, I think, is the most significant change. Everything else was, hey, Chris and Jill, you didn't finish this thought. So we did remove that as an ability in Canal District because we had the conversation and said, you know what, 3 stories is tall enough in Canal District.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
And we've seen that technique used previously in the village, not necessarily for a 4th story, but with the Historic Preservation Commission talking about the telephone building over on West Ave, that there was an additional floor put on there, but it was set back so that it didn't create this massive building to anybody who was down on the street or driving by. And it's a technique that I'm assuming gets used in communities to help avoid looking like you're a community of 4-story buildings.
Yeah, there's a balance that we're striking, right? Because we want to be a community of all single-story buildings, but we want to make sure that we're appropriate for the pedestrian scale because we are a very walkable community.
The land further north on Main Street, the topographic slope of the land slants downward as you head north on Main Street, and the land sort of on the south end is higher. Has a higher elevation in general. So I'm just.
So the 2 ends where we're seeing the greatest elevation change on Main Street are both residential, and they're going to continue to be residential. The area that we're talking about in terms of, can we flip back maybe? Joe is going to know everything at the end of this about the zoning code.
I guess I was just saying,
If you could
when
bring
you
the
go
map
4
up.
stories on land that's lower, it's not as it doesn't feel.
Right.
It
Well, and the area that we're
doesn't
talking.
feel 4 stories because it's the land
area-
is slopes downward.
And that's why you use a special permit process, because that's a very specific point that allows the planning board in that process to not judge everything uniformly. Because if you have a slope, to your point, a 4-story building on something that's of lower
Could look like-
elevation will not be as impactful as something that's of higher elevation. So the planning board, in looking at the drawings and the plans, will take that into consideration to say this is an appropriate site for that 4th story because, for example, perhaps the topography slopes in a direction that allows its impact at street level, right, to not be as drastic as something that would be 5-10 feet perhaps higher in elevation, just
Yeah,
to pick
and
an
just
arbitrary number.
to exactly why it's a special permit. So there's that element of evaluation that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to point out on the map where you were talking about, Jill?
Yep, so it's the reddish salmon color, the downtown district.
Can you just share with me, since I'm not a zoning person, in the downtown area, it looks like there's no setbacks on any of the four sides, and you're allowed 100% coverage of the building.
Yep.
What's the thinking behind that? That just seems, because I know when we did a lot of feedback, again, I don't want to say the Diane Prinz building, but that, we got a lot of feedback that just looked really awkward, and it was too big, and it was too close, and I guess I don't understand, or explain to me this thinking behind 100% lot coverage with no parking and special permit up to 4 stories.
Well, so in terms of the parking, if they're going to have parking on site, that forces that fact that it's not going to be 100% covered, right? So just because the requirement, it has to meet all of the requirements, right? So in terms of the front setbacks, that's what you have throughout most of your village today. That's where it is. The building is right up against the sidewalk. People like to stroll and see the windows, and that's kind of the classic type of Main Street. And so we are mimicking that. Now, if you have a big building, then that might not be appropriate, and you do need to set that back a bit. So that's why there are options if you're doing, for example, a 4th story. The building, if it was a 4-story building without an upper floor step back, you would want the whole building to be stepped back to soften it. Same thing with the side setbacks. We often see that the buildings are right next to each other. So we want to allow that type of classic sort of traditional development to continue to occur. That being said, as I noted, you have to meet all of the other requirements.
Thank you.
Are you able to point out those 5 development districts that meet the requirement of the 8 acres that we spoke of before?
I do have a
Or-
map and I can provide it to you.
Okay, I'm just
Yep.
curious where they would be.
Well, real quick, I think it's important to remember, though, too, that it's not limited to those, right? It could be if somebody decides they want to purchase every single lot.
On your street.
Right. Or if they wanted to buy my entire block, they could buy my entire block, and then maybe the block next to that, and then turn that into a PDD.
Yeah.
That's very expensive.
But let me
but-
I'm just
caution,
curious,
okay?
like where they would
So-
most likely be.
I want to go take that back a little bit. They could purchase your entire neighborhood. They could say, we want to turn this into something else.
And we could say no.
Correct. So just because somebody wants to do something doesn't mean that they get to do it, right? So that's why there are a lot of processes within the code that need a land use board approval or they need the village board approval. So that's important to note. So we talk about planned development districts as these things that could happen, but it's not easy, right? So I can say that I want to buy a really cool purse. Well, there's these things that I have to do before I buy that purse, right? Like I have to line up the money to pay for it. I have to get myself to the store. All of these things have to happen. So I might want it, but there's steps that I have to take to actually get that purse. Not a really good analogy, not my best, but we've got more time.
So Jill, if you could send just a general note out stating these are the parcels, whatever 5 they are.
Yep, I do have the map, and that'll give you an idea of where are these parcels that have that acreage.
Like a higher potential of this
Yeah,
happening.
one of the properties I think to think about, and I don't want to bring up, but the school, right? We know that we're seeing fewer students. What happens if the school district decides at some point that they would like to sell that property? What do we as a community do about it? The planned development district offers that opportunity for us to really be in the driver's seat. The other part of it is that it's in a residential district, so even more so, we're in the driver's seat because the uses that are allowed in those residential districts are very limited. So it's thinking ahead on what could some of these larger parcels, what may they be in the future, and do we have the tools in the toolbox to manage that?
I guess just on a suggestion, because you want these maps to be as absolutely as clear as possible. because it's a visual, people like visuals. Could you put back in all the green spaces? Because I don't want it to be misinterpreted that, oh, they've zoned all the parks residential now.
So if you look at the residential requirements, public, semi-public use is actually an allowed use, and it includes parks in that. So there is the ability for those parks to expand. They are legal uses. So I hesitate to do that, and we can talk about that internally, because they're not a separate zoning district. So yes, the canal's in there, but we know that nobody's going to be putting anything in the canal. So public, semi-public use allows for parks, and it's an allowed use in those districts. So that's why they're not labeled a separate color. I'm happy to add that as a label. We could do that as a label for those properties and, call it park. We could look into doing that.
Maybe put a little star on top of the yellow, and then in the key, star indicates
We
this
could
is
just
a
write
park.
park.
Yeah.
We could definitely look into that, but I don't want to create additional confusion with adding that layer, because we don't have a separate district and we don't have specific regulations for parks.
Anything else, Tracy?
No, I guess I can send some emails. Because it's a lot.
We've got time, though, so whatever you'd like to go through. Because I'm sure if you have questions, somebody else will have a question as well.
Let's see what I marked. Residential clusters.
One thing that did pop out to me, and maybe this is a further conversation or something we continue to chew on, is the definition of a blank wall. I know the way it's outlined was a wall without any articulation, if I could boil it down. In my mind, a blank wall is any wall without a window that has an occupied space behind it that you can look into. The only reason why the main reason why I'm bringing that up is, in my mind, as I'm reading through, I'm thinking, okay, how can we break this, right?
Well, I believe there's a transparency requirement. So you talk about being able to look into the windows, and we want that too. And so when you are on a street frontage, you have to provide a certain percentage of transparency. So there have to be windows. The blank wall, we also want to ensure that there aren't large areas of blank walls. And I think that we may allow some of that in the industrial district just because of the nature of those uses.
Okay.
But we really want to see transparency. We want windows to be open. We don't, in fact, in the sign code as well, you'll notice that I believe the number we settled on was 30% of the percentage of window that can be covered, because it's not only important to be able to see in, but also to see out of that window. So we want to make sure that people see people doing things, right? And so we've gone to great lengths, I think, to ensure that those types of regulations are within the code.
Okay.
Tracy, do you have something else that you came on?
Like for the accessory dwelling unit, is there a parking requirement for that additional piece on site?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I
There
think.
is.
Okay.
I can't recall what it is off the top of my head, but it's in the code. It's
It's in
part
the
of the, it's in the charter.
It's in the chart,
requirements.
okay.
In the chart.
Yeah, I think it was one per.
So you'll notice that there is that chart, and all of those uses are uses that are either permitted or specially permitted within residential districts.
Oh, right, okay.
Vehicle rental, I was just looking out for bikes and boats. That's okay? And how they're being stored. It says vehicle rental.
So vehicle rental is referring to like an Avis or a Dollar, whatever you would go to rent a vehicle. So one of the reasons that we thought that might be a good opportunity to put in there as an allowed accessory use is because we're trying to encourage other means of transportation. So let's say if somebody says, you know what, I hate having to own a car, but once in a while I have to go see my brother in Massachusetts. and I know that I need to rent a car. We want somebody to be able to just go and walk and rent that car and then return it and go back to their maybe car-free lifestyle.
Thank you. Landscape standards. I don't know if this is public and private as well, but you're not allowed to plant any invasive species anywhere in the village?
So that would be specific to the site development criteria that you're talking about. We are not encouraging invasive species. I did meet with a local landscape architect to run over the things that we were thinking about to ensure that we're planting things that are appropriate. And I think this kind of speaks to what we're doing on Main Street. We're making sure that
absolutely.
those trees that we plant are ones that are appropriate for the environment. So we don't want to see invasive species, although in some instances they're really pretty. We want to caution against that. So if somebody came in and they said, I'm designing this parking lot, and we know that they have to have landscaping, and they said, I know this species is invasive, but it has really pretty purple flowers. Well, that's a hard no for us, right? The landscaping code says, nope, that's not an option. We want things that are salt tolerant. We want things that are appropriate to this climate.
And is that public and residential, or just things like,
I believe that's only for private, or for commercial properties.
that's what I was asking for clarification?
Yes.
Because then it gets into enforcement, you didn't plant a big enough
No,
tree, or you
and the
put
reality,
in
no,
something in your yard.
no, yes, but if, and we see that sometimes when people are presenting the planning board with a site plan and they say that I'm going to plant trees, and the trees maybe are, we would like to see a 2-inch caliper, 3-inch caliper, and they say, hey, my son was growing this seed that they found in the yard, and I'm just going to plant that. So we also want to hold some standards so that when a board approves based on a drawing, that landscaping looks good from day one.
Thank you. When I was looking at noise, because I know when I was talking with Chief, that's something that they get called in a lot on, the noise. Where is the chapter 330 of Village Code?
Yep, so that's the noise ordinance.
So ordinances are different than this.
So the zoning code covers the use of land, the noise ordinance, and everything within that zoning code is something that Mark enforces, so your code enforcement officer. When it comes to the noise ordinance, that's something that the police department enforces. And that's typical of any community that I've lived and worked in, that noise ordinance is enforced by the police department. It's outside of the code.
zoning
It's
code,
it's
but
a
who
different
writes
chapter.
that? Or updates that? Or
The village
We
board,
can.
yeah, board
Okay.
trustees board.
Okay. Air quality, can people still have fire pits in their backyard?
Of course they can.
Good.
But I encourage you to follow the DEC regulations and to also ensure that you're meeting New York State Building Code, because there are requirements as to how far away you have to be through structures. If you are considering having a fire pit in your backyard and you're concerned about those things, please call Mark Lindsay and he can walk you through that.
Now, I have friends that are in, outside of Parenton, and anything like open burning or burning of leaves or any of that, that's all prohibited?
Well, the DEC regulates that, and they do have periods of time where they don't want you to burn.
Okay.
So I've now gone out of zoning code,
I'm just asking.
not in the zoning code.
Okay, I can ask those separate.
What are you most proud of about this?
I think the design requirements, I guess I'm going to speak for Chris and think that he's also happy with those. But also secretly, I'm really excited about dumpster enclosures. And you laugh, but you're going to leave today and you're going to notice all the dumpsters that aren't enclosed.
I noticed that our compost station drop-off sites are now partially enclosed, so
And those
we're walking the
things,
walk.
they make a big difference to how a site looks. And so
Oh, for sure.
a lot of those elements in there that I think people are going to pass over are important to what you see on a daily basis. So what does your front porch look like? What does your fence look like? Where on a commercial structure are the mechanicals located and are they screened? So those little things that you may not notice today, I hope that you leave here and you think about where those things are.
Can you, that's what I was trying to find, the front porch section, because I remember reading something about enclosure.
I want to say it's
And I can't.
in the residential
find it
design
again.
standards.
Okay. Can you speak to the enclosure section of that?
I think it said like if your property is near a public access, you had to enclose your porches?
No, we don't want you to enclose your porch. In fact, you found the not, which that was a mistake on our part in the first draft that you had received. We do not want people to enclose their porches.
Yeah, that's what I read, and I was like, wait, we don't want this.
Yes, we
Okay,
fixed
thank
that.
you. I thought
Does
I was
OSUD
like,
know
That's
we're
where
doing
the
that?
eyes were
I read
glazed
it 3
over.
times, and I was like, why does it say we want this enclosed?
No, we
Okay.
want you to have an open
Yes,
front
okay,
porch.
great,
And so
perfect.
that speaks to, we talk a lot about how the zoning code works with other departments, other folks. OSED obviously has a front porch grant. We want to be supportive of that. We are a front porch community. And how do people engage with each other? You see a lot of people sitting on their lawns, sitting on their porches. We want to encourage that. We do not want you to enclose your front
Right.
porch.
We want them to open the porches
Open
that
the
are
porch.
enclosed.
Yeah, I saw that too, like, what?
Okay.
Okay, signage. I can ask other questions later. You can't use an A-frame sign? What is that?
So that's the signs that you see in the public right-of-way that are portable.
I thought so. I just wanted to know because we do have businesses currently now that do use A-frame signs on a regular basis.
We'd like to encourage them to explore different ways of communicating that their business is open, is selling different things, things that are perhaps signage. They could use the alternative sign program and get really creative with how they're communicating that their business is present there. So if you drive down a street, if everybody is using an A-frame, then the message gets lost. So we're happy to work with people to discuss other options, and I know we have some local sign companies that I'm sure would be excited to discuss those options as well.
And I was just going to speak to the greater use of A-frames right now than back when the lift bridge was going into the up position. The zoning officer or the code enforcement officer and the Office of Zoning tried to be a little more flexible because of the situation where businesses were really trying hard to get their names out into the public because of the bridge being in the up position. And I think that we've tried to be flexible from the zoning perspective as well with things that are happening with other projects that are happening on Main Street that have caused disruption on Main Street. And I'm not talking about the Main Streetscape, I'm talking about the New York State DOT program. So I totally know what you're saying about seeing A-frame signs. I think that there was a certain amount of flexibility that was tried to be available to merchants because of some of the challenges that we've faced over the last 5 or 6 years. And hopefully, we can get more back in alignment with what the zoning code actually reads.
Because I know enforcement was really challenging
Yeah, we were trying to help those businesses that people really couldn't see that they were there because of the lift bridge being in the up position. I'm just speaking to what is currently the existing in our village and where some of it came from, because they used to get pulled off the street.
Is short-term rental something that can be addressed in the code?
So we had a long conversation with Pat Gooch, again, my colleague in Monroe County, about this. And at this point, we'd like to hold off until the county decides the path that they're going to take. So New York State is now saying, hey, counties, you can now decide, you can have a list of all of those short-term rentals, and you can manage that list, and you can handle enforcement, and you can do all of those things. Monroe County hasn't made a decision yet as to how they're going to handle that. So we, as Chris mentioned earlier, when we're amending the code, it can happen fairly quickly. So if the county says, and my understanding is that they will have a determination on that hopefully mid-September. If we hear something sooner, then we can react to that. But if the county is going to take over enforcement of that and regulation of that, there's no need for us to also regulate. The other side of that is that most of the things that people dislike about short-term rentals, we currently have code that can solve those issues. We encourage people, if they have something that they're concerned about, something just doesn't seem right, to give us a call and we can most definitely address that. So if somebody is parking on their front lawn, whether it be a short-term rental or a family that just decided, to heck with all rules, I'm using my front lawn as a parking lot. If there is a lot of noise happening, and let's say it's after hours and it's bothersome to you, call the police department and tell them that you're having these issues. If there's trash all over the yard, we have means to enforce that as well. So we're waiting to see how the county wants to proceed with this, and then we'll be able to react.
Because I've always thought too about having a registry, just so emergency response people and the police department knows if they're getting a call, whether it's a short-term rental or not too. But
Well, I think the response would be the same if it was a single family, a two-family, a three-family. We heard earlier that Sergeant Barnes, immediately responded to a false call. And so I think regardless of how that structure is being used, when our E911 folks get a call, they respond as quick as possible.
The other piece I'll throw in there, which isn't applicable necessarily for the zoning code piece, but what the state is doing to try and discourage LLCs and corporations from buying up housing is, I think they are not allowed to look into single-family homes or multifamily homes to purchase them until 45 days after the property has been on the marketplace. And that was a New York State law that was implemented, I think in January, it became official. So New York State is regulating that piece.
and that's forever and ever, not just 6 months?
No, it's New York State
Okay.
code.
Last one. What is an internal illumination of signs? That is,
Yeah, so that's if the lighting, gosh, I wish we had a good example.
It's like any sign you see if you went to buy an Office Max, right?
Yes.
It says Office Max,
Yep.
and it's in red, and you can see it at night because the lights inside the letters shine, right?
Yep, it's,
It's Jefferson Avenue.
I wasn't going to say it, but yes, it's Henrietta. And they are very proud for the tax revenue that they bring in, but that's the style of, you wouldn't expect signage that was flat against a building with gooseneck lighting on Jefferson Avenue, right? So what signage regulations do is they look at what the environment is, and you're tailoring those requirements to the environment. So appropriate for Jefferson Avenue, not appropriate for Main Street in the Village of Fairport.
Jefferson Road.
Jefferson Road, I'm sorry, I
you.
said Jefferson Avenue. Not appropriate for Jefferson Avenue in the town of Perrington, not appropriate for Jefferson Avenue in the city of Rochester, not appropriate for Jefferson Avenue in the city of Buffalo either.
no, I just kind of thought, hopefully our current brandy new Village of Fairport signs don't qualify.
I believe that there is an exemption for government signs in the sign regulations, and
got this.
that wasn't done to skirt anything. That's typical of regulations because obviously government buildings have different signage, fire departments have different signage, and so we wanted to make sure that we're capturing everything.
Just want to lead by example, not be having those prohibitive signs everywhere.
Not grandfathered in, currently also an exception.
Thank you. It's very, very thorough, very, very thorough.
Okay, last call. Is there anyone who has a last question for Chris or for Jill? All right, so if members of the board come across a burning question and they really need some help, how would you like them to manage that from this point forward until we have our next meeting about this?
So I think what would be best at this point, and Chris, correct me because we haven't talked about this, so I'm going to speak off the cuff. I think it might be best if you were to email those questions to me, and then Chris and I will work on responses and then send them to all of you. So that way, all of the information is being communicated. I think that in my time has been the easiest, so that everybody knows what everybody's asking and what that information is.
I was going to say, when you ask the question, CC the rest of the board so that we all know that this question's been asked. We don't need to ask it another time. And then you can respond back. Anything else?
Well, I just want to remind people about tomorrow, the draft code will be posted on the zoning code update page. Please be patient with me because I am going to post it. I'm doing all the IT work. So it will be up there. And then we will have the public meeting that will be at Johanna Perrin on the 13th at 7 o'clock. We encourage everyone to come here. It'll be the same presentation. We then have 2 open house styles at the library on the 14th and the 15th.
Time?
I believe it's a 9:30 to 12:30.
It's 9:30 to 12:30.
And then 11:30 to 2:30.
Yes. Okay, with that, I would like to thank not only the zoning working group, but thank Jill and Chris and all the folks who have gone through hours and hours and hours of work on this to get it to the point where we have something that we can start to consider moving forward with. You've done a great job of presenting it here, a great job of trying to keep us in the loop, especially when there's some last minute finds that, that no is supposed to be gone with front porches. And I just want to thank all of the team for the work that it's taken to get to this. It's a momentous task. So I'll let any other board members who want to make any comments about that. I just know how much work this has taken. And thank you for also having lively conversation and respecting different points of view. I think all of the board says thank you.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I know it's a lot of work to get, a draft of something like this in front, and it's continually a work in progress, even after it's adopted. We're as Chris mentioned, we're not going to wholesale change things, but there may be little tweaks as time goes on. So, I appreciate that. And, it's a lot of work getting there. And like I said, I'll have a few things, like a few of the, maybe some typos and things that we noticed to kind of help through, because I know after you've read through it the umpteenth time, you almost have to read it backwards and upside down to find anything that might have been missed. So appreciate the work that has gone into this.
Thank you. So if anybody is listening or is here still, if you go to fairportny.com, so the village, you don't have to put in village, but fairportny.com, and if you go up to the search tool at the top, if they type draft zoning code, will that be the title that they can find it under? I would do zoning code update. Okay, zoning code update. So go to the search tool at the top of the web page and zoning code update, and that should help you to find this on our website once it's posted tomorrow sometime.
Does it still have a pop-up when you get there? When you go,
There's a pop-up on our website. We
Yeah.
can set it
Yep,
for
so
whatever.
tomorrow morning, I will set that up so that it will also have the direct link. So there's going to be a lot of IT work happening in my office tomorrow morning. Like I said, bear with me. If anybody does have issues bringing up the file, I'm happy to send you a direct link. So don't hesitate to give me a call or shoot me an email.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. With that, I think we're ready to move on to the next topic. So if there was anybody who was here just for the zoning code update, feel free. You don't have to sit through the financial end of year statement. If you want to sit through the financial end of year statement, you're more than welcome to stay. Look at all these folks. But thank you for everybody who came. We're going to get you ready in just a second. Bob, are you going to stay? Oh. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Good. Good. We'll make sure that she hears that over and over from people. Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. Okay, Megan, I think we're ready to move on. Let me look at the agenda. So that was the draft zoning code presentation and discussion, and that is done. So let's move on to item number 3, which is full year 2024-2025 year-end financial report. And then I am assuming all of these motions that follow that, with the exception of the executive session one, that they all follow on with the report that we're going to hear from Megan. Match that presentation, Megan.
My feelings are kind of hurt, so thanks for being here, Jean.
For anybody who watches this online after the fact, everybody in the room got up and left at the end of the zoning code, except for Jean, who works in the clerk treasurer's office, so.
Okay, so this is the, I'll change the name of it to the almost final 24-25 financial report. We are still waiting for the April-May sales tax. So right now, I just assumed we met budget. We'll see where that comes in, and we should have a final number for you at our August meeting. And these numbers are unaudited. The auditors start on Monday, and they typically present sometime in the fall to you guys when you finally accept the financial statements. Okay, so I'm going to start with the general fund, spend most of the time there. I'll start with the balance sheet. That's on page 5 of my document. When you look at this, it's a 30-line balance sheet, and really all it tells you is what's the value of the general fund at the end of the day. If we exchanged money at the time services were rendered, this would be a one-line statement. It'd be like looking at your bank account. But there's always timing issues. So really what your fund balance or the value of the general fund is at the end of the year is obviously cash in the bank, plus what's owed to us that we haven't received in cash yet, that's your other assets, less what do we owe to others that we haven't paid for yet. That's your liabilities. So that's what the other 29 lines in here are besides cash. So just to highlight some of those things, the cash that we have is a liquid number. It's 74% of your fund balance. So that's a good thing. You don't have this high fund balance but no cash to spend. Then the other assets we do have some bills that are outstanding just due to timing. But the big one, and we talked about this all the time, is we front the money for the grants. That is your due from other funds, your $1.4 million number. That is for the TAP grant for CHIPS. We have to front all that money from the general fund before we get reimbursed. So while that's an asset, because we know we're going to get cash, it's not really cash. Then our liabilities, some of the big ones, the audit committee will tell you, in accounts payable, they've been looking at 2 stacks of piles for the last 2 months. What's my 24-25 pile versus what's my 25-26 pile? That's just because contractors bill us after the fact. So we haven't gotten all of our May stuff in. So that's a liability we owe at the end of May. Another big one is payroll. There's May payroll that's not paid in June. We have to accrue that at the end of the year. And then New York State retirement, the village's contribution, even though we report monthly, they bill us once a year. So they don't bill us until December, so we have to keep building up that liability each month to what we owe. So that brings you down to your fund balance. At the bottom of the page, your total fund balance in general fund is $3.2 million, and that gets further broken down. We talked about what's restricted, what's unassigned. Of that, your unassigned fund balance is $2.7 million, and we'll dive deeper into that number as we get further through this report. So any questions about the balance sheet? I know we don't really talk about balance sheet a lot. We usually just talk revenue and expenses, but that's kind of how to read this and where we're at. Nothing? Okay. So moving on to revenues, that's page 6 of your document. We ended the year at 99% total earned of our budget. And what's important to note here is we earned 99% of the budget without utilizing fund balance as a revenue source. And I'll get more into that as we dive into this. But some of the big discrepancies here I've highlighted for you. Pilot agreements, that's just a reallocation issue. There were certain bills that the people we were working with didn't want to be called a pilot, so we reclassed it to real property taxes. We've adjusted the budget moving forward, so that won't be an issue. This is kind of offset by the overage you see in rental of real property later on, so that's really just a classification issue.
Out of curiosity, why, like, if they're getting a pilot, why don't they want to call it a pilot?
Traditionally, we had always billed it as payment in lieu of taxes, but we were using what the taxes would have been as a mechanism to charge rent. So they were right, it really wasn't a pilot. We were just using the tax rate as a basis for their rent.
I see, okay.
It's a classification for one.
Yeah, sure.
So we made that change moving forward. It was during this budget season, so next year's budget reflects that. Departmental culture and recreation, this is the line that holds the farmers market vendor fees and the docking fees. The docking fees were down this year. I think we talked about that in our mid-year report. And then the farmer market, it was just a late start of when the market manager started. So, I mean, she didn't really ramp up until May, starting to charge customers. So that stuff you'll see come in June, July, and August of the next fiscal year. So that was truly a timing of when the market was started up. Rental of real property, we've kind of discussed. Part of that overage of $33,000 was a classification issue, but also the gross receipts. We do receive a portion of the gross receipts from the Village Landing, and that beat our projection by $10,000. So that's a number we get once a year in and around April. Okay. The next two highlighted items, sale of property, insurance recoveries, and miscellaneous. These are unpredictable revenue sources. We do not budget for them because we never know what they're going to be. We could get nothing some years, and some years we could get something. The insurance recoveries were just a one-time recovery for a workers' comp claim because we continued wages, so we got a portion of that back. We don't always have workers' comp claims. And then the miscellaneous were two refunds, one from our workers' comp consortium that had to do with the reserve of our admin costs. They returned some of the money because the admin costs didn't come in as high. And then our healthcare consortium, in an effort to ease the increase in healthcare, gave everybody a little bit of cash from the wellness fund to help bridge the gap with the rate increases. So that's what those two overages were.
I think that went well above and beyond what we were expecting, huh?
Yeah. The last overage we kind of see here is mortgage tax. We're just starting to see stabilization of interest rates, and that's bringing that number back up. During the budget for the 25-26 year, we did increase that because we're starting to see that trend come back up. And the last thing I did want to note, as I had mentioned, we didn't use appropriated fund balance. It's kind of weird when you look at this revenue report. You see, well, we budgeted $201,000 and we didn't get it. Appropriated fund balance isn't a revenue stream. It is, you are planning for an operating loss that year. So the fact that we don't have a revenue stream in here is a good thing. You use appropriated fund balance if your revenues come in under fund balance, meaning you have to dip into your savings to balance the budget. So the fact that none of it was used is definitely a good thing. So just wanted to mention that. And we were able to still recover 99% of what we budgeted without having to dip into savings. Any question with revenues? Okay. Moving on to expenditures. For the year, we spent or encumbered 94% of our budget. So we came in a little bit under budget. And I'm going to go through some of those savings for you now. The first one, I always highlight the contingency account. We didn't tap into that this year. So that's where you see the savings of $25,000. We didn't ask the board to reallocate any of those funds. The police, there was a available budget at the end of the year of close to $70,000. This was due to a delay in hiring a patrolman. We had planned to have overlap of about 5 months. There was, I think, a week overlap, so just due to the hiring process there. And then there was some savings in fuel, and we've adjusted the budget moving forward for that reduced fuel cost that we've been seeing over the last couple of years. So those were both numbers we knew at the time we projected year end during the budget. So that was something known to us. The next line item, DPW administration, that came in under budget of close to $50,000. Again, it's personnel. We don't have that many staff, so when you lose 3 people in DPW for a couple months, it makes a huge difference. It made a huge difference in this line item with salaries. We lost them in January or February. We didn't fill those positions until May. So during projections, we had assumed we were going to fill those in a timelier manner, and that was the right thing to do operationally. That's the true operational cost of the village, but that didn't happen, and that led us to have more go down to fund balance. Okay. Moving on, ZBA and Planning Board, they look like they had a lot of money left over, $17,000 and $25,000. There's this mechanism on the revenue side and the expense side with planning and ZBA. We always put a matching revenue and expense of anything we might have to bill back to the applicant. We don't know what that's going to be. We don't know what projects are going to come, but it's usually net neutral. So there was a budget shortfall in the revenue, and there was a budget shortfall in the expense. So it was a net zero effect on the budget. Refuse collection. This was just due to a decrease in tipping, and we knew this at the time that we were doing our budget projections. We were meeting with Jason, where we saw we were going to be at the end of the year, and we subsequently also reduced the budget for next year, because we've had this conversation for like the last 2 to 3 years, seeing it come down.
It's hard to budget because it's like, well, are we trashier this year than last year? Meaning it comes down to tipping fees. That's what it comes down to. So maybe, I mean, for $6,500, that's $65 a ton. It's not a lot. So it means maybe 20 less homes cleaned out their basement can change that number. That's what we're talking about. So it's we're right in there at the 99th percentile, but you're always guessing it, right, based on what you do in practice. Yeah. I mean, you can change that by us picking up 6 trees that may weigh collectively between the tonnage, 20 tons of a tree, and only 6 trees in the village, and get you back to that number. So it's so close. You can never do it, right? There's your ballpark, and that's where you live.
Hopefully, we never have the house cleanouts that we had in 2020, 21. Because that was crazy.
Okay, so there's 2 more on the expense side. Shade trees, this is due to the timing of the tree trimming contracts. We knew we weren't going to get it in all this year. This was the number that we projected, and this is where we fell. So those contracts have been encumbered to the next year, and we've reduced the budget for next year knowing we had money rolling over. And that was presented in the 25-26 budget. And the last item was we had $50,000 left over in employee benefits. This goes along with the reason why police was under budget, DPW was under budget. We had health care for those employees. We had planned to have 5 more months of health care for a police officer, 3 more months of health care for 3 laborers. I mean, that's huge money. And we put those in the projections because it was the right thing to do. That's the true cost of the village, but it just didn't happen. So now those have fallen to fund balance at the end of the year. So that's expenditures. If there's any questions on those. Nothing? Yeah.
Do like the fire department or the police department, do they ever go for grants?
Yes, on the capital side, the police department, and that's one of your budget amendments here, actually, they've been very successful. They got a grant for their UTV, they got a grant for their body cams, they got a grant for the tasers.
They have a regular grant for Stop DWI.
Yeah. On the capital side, they get a lot of
We're
grants.
just not there yet.
We're just not there yet, yeah. Okay.
The 38.7 under fire, under the fire department, that was,
That was turnout gear that was purchased,
turnout gear.
fiscal year, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you'll see that later on.
Oh, okay. Well, if we're getting
so
to
we
it, don't let me get
had-
ahead of you then.
We had a budget, or we have a budget amendment that we're getting approved tonight. I think Brian sent everybody an email about it. The fire department thought the lead time on the turnout gear was going to be so far out that they purchased 25-26 turnout gear before year end, and actually came in before year end. So we made a budget amendment to appropriate more fund balance, which we didn't have to use, to fund that expenditure. And then we're also asking the board in the 25-26 budget to reduce that line item by the overage, so they don't spend it again the next year.
Right. Right, okay.
I know. Okay, so page 9 really ties everything together for the three statements. We just talked about the balance sheet, the revenues, and the expenditures. So this is your change in fund balance. What did we start the year at? The $3 million number. Your revenues that we took in, that increases it, and your expenditures that you took out decreases it. So at the end of the year, revenues exceeded expenditures, as we've discussed. We didn't have to use fund balance, and they exceeded expenditures by $102,000. So your fund balance is now $3.2 million. Overall, we increased $102,000. At the time of budget, we thought we were going to use fund balance of $46,000. That's a swing of $150,000. And when I was doing this, I was like, where did we go wrong? What happened? But there was $70,000 of those weird one-time revenues, those refunds we never know if we're going to get, and those insurance recoveries that are one-time things. And then on the other side, so that was revenue we didn't think we were going to get, we operationally don't always get. And on the other side, the personnel savings between police and DPW with employee benefits was $80,000. So that 80 and that gets you to your 150. So I mean, personnel's huge on the expenditure side.
These are anomalies. We're still budgeting as if we're at full capacity.
Right.
So while this worked out this year, we went budget as if we won't see that again, because we're budgeting at our full operating capacity if everything's right. There's always been fluctuations and ebb and flow in those things.
Right.
I just don't want you to assume that, oh, well, we've done it this year, next year it should materialize. No.
Right.
We don't want to have that type of fluctuation in the budget. We want to have more consistency within the labor side of things, but this is how just any company operates, right?
Yeah, it's like 70% of our budget. Yep.
We are service.
So your end of year unassigned fund balance, now you're at 2.7 million, and that's at about 36% of next year's budget. So as of right now, we're outside of the scope of our fund balance policy, which is between 20 and 30,000%. 20 and 30%. Once we have that final sales tax number, we're going to come back to the board with a final proposal of what we do with that excess, transferring it to the reserve, that type of thing. Where it's much needed, as we'll get to later on.
Will it likely go to capital spending in the
Yes.
future?
Yeah.
Capital reserve.
Yeah.
That's where it should be.
Yeah.
It's one-time revenue, and that's where it should go to fund those things. You don't want to start subsidizing your operations as Megan stated. budget, you're saying, I'm okay with my structure expenses exceeding my anticipated revenue. I'm okay with an operating deficit, and I'm gonna use one-time revenue to do that, instead of fixing the operating deficit that you have. We don't wanna get into practice of this. All the things we talked about, I mean, I'm sure a lot of this sounds just like our budget discussions, right? I mean, it's all tying together. And you wanna keep those velocities going, right? And then you can always put it in reserve, if it has to come back out, the board has that ability to do it. You know, if we need to make an operational thing for next year's budget or whatever, but that's where it should be, right? It's your money, it's there. We're at the top end of our fund balance policy that you've established for us to set city guidelines to determine where we put that money.
Any questions on the general fund? Okay. I'm just going to highlight the next couple funds. I mean, the general funds where a lot of the day-to-day work is. So moving on to the capital projects fund, the balance sheet, page 11. This looks a little different from years past. Typically with the capital fund, we fund expenses at the time we cut the check, just for two reasons. On a reconciliation basis, it just keeps everything matching with your cost and your revenue source or your funding source. And also because we have most of our funding invested, it keeps that money in the NICLAS accounts that are earning interest. So normally we don't have cash in the bank and we don't have a fund balance at the end of the year. But this year's a little unique. In May, we went out and got a short-term loan to help us with the streetscape program. And it was an interesting short-term loan. We got it for $1.9 million, but in an effort to give us an effective interest rate that was lower, they gave us a premium of $18,000 to keep in the bank to help offset the interest payment when it comes due. That's beyond why they do all the smoke and mirrors with that, I don't know. But at the end of the day, we do have 1.98 in cash, and we owe 1.9 in a band payable when it becomes due. So that extra 18,000 is sitting in our bank. So when the interest payment comes due, we have that money to offset and get an effectively lower interest rate than we were given. So that's kind of what's going on with the balance sheet with the capital projects fund. There's timing stuff as well. The state and federal receivable aid, that 1.4 million number, that should look really familiar to the general fund. It matches it exactly, the amount that's due from other funds. So once we receive the grant money, we receive in the capital projects fund, and we pay back the general fund. So again, this is our TAP grant and our CHIPS grant. We've already received 700,000 of this sitting here today. The money's moving a lot quicker than we thought it was going to, which is really nice. So that's the balance sheet for the capital projects fund. Any questions on that one?
Make it sound so wonderful. I just listen. It's perfect. I get it. It's lovely.
That's why cash flow is so important. She's talking about, the ban and that 1.9 million and having that and 18,000. I mean, the whole point of that, we went around, remember during budget, we went around the cart on this issue. Do we take the risk of having cash flow with the grants that are out there, having enough timing to get these things reimbursed in a timely fashion? Can we do that and not put ourselves in a predicament where we can't meet a payout of $1 million?
Right.
And in the end, we chose to be on the conservative side to make sure the due diligence from a financial perspective is taken care of regardless of cost. Is it the right move or not? Cash flow's really good. Our chips now is being reimbursed on a quarterly basis. We changed that policy during the budget. I asked that these are coming in on a quarterly basis, and they're hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And we're doing TAP monthly. We're submitting for reimbursement.
So when you guys approve those TAP grants, I mean, the last one was what, $450,000. They go up to $1 million. That's cash out the door. And when the next one's coming in 4 weeks later, right, to go under vouchers, we got to have that reimbursed. We got to have these things done. God forbid we miss one off, or the state says, "Oh, I didn't see that." Well, we're going to be in a predicament. That's when you start getting in your unrestricted fund balance, which is talking about the 3.7 million, to go pay those things out until such time as you can do it.
Gets messy. We don't like messy.
And then she gets upset because the interest goes down.
Yeah, it's messy.
So it's a whole thing.
Right, yeah.
Megan, if you could just see your face, you're like, yeah, right.
No, that's my favorite number when we get to the reserves. It's just, The revenue and expenditures statement for capital projects fund, the expenditures kind of shows all the projects, all the capital outlays we had this year. We did $3.5 million of capital work this year. Of that, 1.9 million, was financed through our reserves, so that's about 55% was financed through your reserves. 24% was financed through the CHIPS program. We're really starting to spend that money that's allocated to us and rolled forward every year. So 24% came from CHIPS, and then 19% came from the federal TAP grant for the streetscape. There are some other grants in here, the $30,000, that's the police grants that they were able to get this year.
You're looking at about $8 million this year. That's what we're doing this year.
In capital work.
Oh, okay.
Probably about $8 million when it's all said and done.
So double.
But that's the
Pumping out
streetscape.
the streetscape, it's about 900 grand in chips and
Yeah, yep.
SDR funds. We've already done 500 grand in sidewalks. I mean, we are pumping it out. We're so grateful to have it. You guys make priorities. We are doing the work, and it's great, and it shows throughout the village. Don't look at the commercial quarter. Look throughout the village. It's touched every place. Right? Your
Last
storm
Tuesday, the
sewers are
number
getting
was
the attention we
400K in
need.
sidewalks.
We are moving the needle.
The sidewalks that had heaved and the repairs to those are amazing. I don't know how they do that, but it's amazing. They like sand them down. How do they do that?
It's magic.
We do grind them.
Grind them.
Sometimes as the ground dissipates, it starts to come down anyway on their own. But yeah, we grind them out. It's not really ideal because
It
okay,
weakens the.
by doing that, you are putting a spotlight on your infrastructure that's not perfect. So God forbid there's a liability on those. You'd say basically I knew about it. I ground it versus fixing it correctly. Therefore.
Well, it really levels it out. There was one that, I mean, it was
You gotta do some
significant, and it,
22
yeah,
miles of sidewalk.
it looks great.
You can't just go and fix everything to perfection. It doesn't work that way anywhere in the world. So you do the best you can with what you got, hope for the best. But yeah, doing what we can.
Okay. Oh, yeah, so capital projects fund, at the end of the day, our revenues exceeded our expenditures, which like I said, typically doesn't happen, just due to that $18,000 premium on the ban that we'll use in April or May of this year to pay off the interest, or help us pay off the interest. And that's it for capital projects. Any questions on the accounting of that? Okay. Moving on to the reserve fund. So just as a reminder, we keep our 3 capital reserves completely separate from everything. They're in their own fund. They each have their own bank account. We have the general capital, the fire equipment, and the fire rolling stock. They are completely separate. No funds are commingled or anything like that. Each reserve has its own investment in NICLAS that earns interest on a monthly basis. So at the time a bill is due, I transfer the money from NICLAS and transfer it into the capital projects fund to pay for that cost at the time I get the bill, just to give you some background on that. So at the end of the year, we had 3.4 or 3.1 in reserve funds, 2.2 for your general capital reserve, 609,000 for your fire rolling stock, so like for your vehicles, and 304,000 for the fire equipment reserve. And just going on to the revenues and expenditures, the ins and outs of this fund, there was $902,000 reinvested into these funds this year. Of that $902,000, about $660,000 was your planned budgeted allocation. So when we're doing our expenditures on the general fund side, what's our budgeted transfer into these funds? It's usually like that $350,000, I forget what the other ones are, the $70,000. Those are planned transfers in. There was $9,200 in donations. If you recall, that was for the sculpture, the beacon. there was about 15,000 in one-time revenues that you as the board approved for me to reallocate into the general capital. There was 47,000 in the proceeds of sold equipment. So if we sell a capital item, the proceeds from that go back into the reserve to be used for more capital-related items. There was about $50,000 of that. And then there's $170,000 in interest, which is a huge number, which is, I mean, that's huge for the funds.
And that's a big reason why we don't take, when she talks about, we don't take the money out of those things until the purchases happen, we're actually spending it. We let it sit in there up to the day. There's no sense taking it out, having it ready, or pulling all that money out because you guys budgeted for the year, and having it sit there when we buy the dump truck 9 months from now, right? So the moment the invoice comes out, and you approve the vouchers, she makes a transfer, we approve it, and it goes out in a check. We let it sit and saturate for the day, which makes the difference.
And I mean, all the funding's earmarked like it should for budgetary, so you can't spend it, but I keep it in the investment account until the last moment. So then the transfers out, we had 1.9 million in transfers out, and that number should look familiar to your capital projects fund, the transfers coming in. That was the money we took out of these reserves to fund the cash portion of our capital project expenditures. So that's kind of how this fund works. But looking at it, we took in revenues of 902,000 this year and spent 1.9 million. So we've been talking about this, Brian's brought it up for the last couple years. The expenditures seem to be outweighing the revenues going into these reserves. And while we're funded in the general capital reserve for the next 10 years, the fire rolling stock will be in a deficit shortly. But it's good things to know. We can adjust for it. We're working through it. But it's just things to keep in mind with the reserves, how important it is, because you see all the money that we spend on the capital projects, and we can't have the expenditures outweighing the expenses. So you either have to find other revenue sources to fund these projects or increase the allocation from the general fund.
Or change your operation. But the beauty of these 10-year plans and looking out and knowing exactly, you can see where you're gonna be financially, and we're close. I mean, our year end is gonna be right on point where we are, outside of the sales tax dividends, we're gonna be within 5 or 10 grand, I'm quite certain of it. But now we're making plans for things we wanna do in 4 years, we've already met with town about it. I mean, that gives you the leverage to do that when you have that, and you know where you're gonna go and where it's gonna be and how it's gonna materialize. So it's really important to plan for these things and see where you're going versus just saying, oh, well, we had a pretty good year in sales tax this year, and maybe we'll purchase something next year, and then maybe it doesn't materialize the following year or the year after, right? Or we have a challenge year like we just saw in our plat for this fiscal year. Very, very challenging. Probably one of the most challenging one I've ever seen in my tenure. So we keep doing that and forecasting appropriately. It's so important to what we do.
So that's it for the reserve funds. Any questions on the 3 reserves? No? The next couple pages, the blue and green pages, are just a different version. It kind of shows you how the capital fund and the capital reserves fund work together, but I won't go through those. But that's just the link between those 2 funds. The next one, the sewer fund, on page 22, I'll go over this quickly. Fund balance at the end of the year was 676,000. Most of that is cash. There's a small amount due from Parenton. They've already paid it. They paid it in June. So nothing much there. On the revenue and expense side, it looks a little interesting. It looks like we didn't spend all of our budget this year by a lot. So this was planned for this year. If you recall last year, May of 2024, due to contractor scheduling with Kenyon, they were going to be here in May. They wanted to get all their work done. So at the time, we asked the board to use sewer fund balance to get them here and pay for them in May, even though it was budgeted in 25-26. So that was for our lining and our televising. So that wasn't spent this year. So I think last year So this year fund balance increased by 175,000, and last year it decreased by almost 170,000. So net neutral between the 2 years. We stayed pretty even with the sewer fund, but that was just 100% due to timing of the contractor, just getting them here when it made sense for them. And then the debt service fund, there's not much here. We're required to have a debt service fund by law. All it is, we transfer money in from the general fund. You guys approve those those transfers as part of the budget, and we pay the principal and interest payments when they become due. And it's scheduled, it's a known number. I don't even put budget to actual on here because it always meets budget 100% because it's a agreed upon number. And that's all I have. There's a bank reconciliation there for you if you want it to.
I'm going to look both ways. Anybody that's under the board with any questions that you want to ask or comments?
I don't have any questions, but thank you to both for doing such a great job managing all of these things for the village and making it understandable for all of us up here. Thank you.
Who don't do this as our
It's not
everyday.
my day job.
It's not my day job either. Anything, Adam?
No, same. Appreciate all the work going in.
I'm going to come down here to this end. Any questions or comments?
Just thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's very impressive.
I'll say thank you as well. This makes it so incredibly easy to understand when it could be so incredibly difficult to understand. So thank you, and thank you for the job and the persistence of making sure that we're on target with what we do financially. Thank you.
And to piggyback, it shows years of getting to this point where we don't have to dip into things or fall short and start getting messy and taking stuff. I mean, it took years to get here, and it's impressive. And we're right, and I'm sure a lot of municipalities can't run like that, even if they would like to try.
We are so happy that Megan came here in 2019.
Yeah, so I'm giving you credit for that. It's impressive that you got us all back on track where we don't need to get messy anymore.
Do you want us to go back to the agenda and start moving through the motions? Thank you, Jean. I know you contribute to this as well, so thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for the work that you do every day. Okay, so do you want me to start going through the motions so we can do the funding part? Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. So that is item number 3. I'm going to take to item number 4, a motion by the village board to approve the itemized budget transfers and amendments needed to close full year 2024-2025
So moved.
by trustee Benesky.
Second, trustee Mishler.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That will be unanimous. Item number 5 is a resolution by the Village Board of the Village of Fairport authorizing additional expenditures from the General Capital Reserve Fund for the full year 2024-2025 capital expenditure plan. Can I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved?
Trustee Wyka, seconded by trustee Mishler. Right,
Briggs.
I'm sorry, Briggs. I heard it come from this side, sorry. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? That will be unanimous as well. We're on 7. A resolution by the Village Board of the Village of Fairport authorizing additional expenditures from the Fire Rolling Stock Reserve Fund for the full year 2024-2025 capital expenditure plan.
So moved. Trustee Mishler.
Second.
By trustee Benosky. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? That'll be unanimous. Item number 8 is a resolution by the Village Board of the Village of Fairport authorizing an appropriation of $41,483.80 from unassigned fund balance to finance the spending of the fire department for full year 2024, 2025.
So moved.
By trustee Mishler,
Second.
by trustee Banowski. Questions, comments?
This is the one where they ordered the stock early? All right. So I'm sure they understand though too, spending for something that was budgeted in the following year's budget still means that we accrue that debt in the previous year, right? So I'm sure we've had that conversation.
I think the village manager made that very clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, happy to get them what they need, just making sure that, you know, all the things are in line. Yeah, great.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? That'll be unanimous. Item number 9, a motion by the village board to authorize the clerk treasurer to make the following budget amendment to the full year 2026 general operating budget. Item A 3410.2 for $41,483.80. A 2262 for $483.80.
So moved.
By trustee Mishler,
Second.
by trustee Banowski. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? That will be unanimous. Item number 10 is a motion by the village board to enter into a professional service agreement with MRB Group for New York Forward Downtown Revitalization Initiative Grant Application Assistance.
So moved.
By trustee Woika,
Second.
by trustee Banowski. Questions and comments? So I'm just gonna, I know what this is for. Are we entering into this in conjunction with OSED?
Yes, the contract will be with us, but OSED will be a financial partner with us on this and split the costs associated with it.
Okay.
That's 50/50?
Yes, sir.
As trustee Mishler and I just sat through their meetings, I got to hear about it, but I just wanted to confirm it. Okay. Any other questions or
I'm
comments?
glad you guys are saying the same thing. They match.
With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That is unanimous as well in the affirmative. Item number 11 is a motion by the village board to authorize a special event application for the purposes of facilitating the JMB Kids 5K.
So moved.
By trustee Mishler,
Second,
by trustee
Briggs.
Briggs, I'm sorry.
This is what you emailed us about, Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah, so questions, comments?
Great. It's a great idea. And very minimal impact to the village and the staff. So we love those kind of applications. Okay. Here we go. All in favor? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Any other? I'm glad it's along the canal
Me too.
and has minimal impact to the village. With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? That will be unanimous, and that is approved. Approval of vouchers. Did we did an approval of vouchers?
You have it just for one. It's a Streetscape Pay app.
Okay,
So there's just one, and otherwise the timing would be they wouldn't be submitted for another 2 weeks, and then we'd have to wait another 4 weeks after that for cash flow, and then the next one's coming back. So just due to timing, since we had a meeting of the board, I wanted to get this one approved.
okay. Any questions or comments with that? Okay, can I get a motion in a second? We kind of jumped the gun on that.
So moved.
By trustee Woika,
Second.
by trustee Mishler. Then with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And does that have to get approved through the monthly bills process or?
No, it's on the agenda. You guys
Okay.
are authorizing right now. We're
Okay.
good to go.
I'm
Yeah.
just confirming.
Yeah.
All right. And so that will take us to upcoming meetings. There's going to be a village board meeting Monday, August 11th, 2025 at 6 p.m. located here in the Village Boardroom at 31 South Main Street. There's also a Village Board work session scheduled for Monday, August 25th, 2025 at 6 p.m. And the little star next to it says, all meetings are subject to change, amendment, or cancellation by determination of the Village Board. And occasionally, we need to do things differently because of timing of schedules. So that's our upcoming schedule. And from here, I'm going to skip asking for announcements this evening just so that we can move to our executive session.
I concur.
Okay.
Just another plug for the zoning meetings.
Sure. So, Adam, do you have the sheet? Here you go. You wanted to do it? There's the sheet.
Just a reminder, as Jill mentioned, we have got the zoning meetings coming up August 13th, 7 p.m. at the cafetorium of JP. August 14th from 9:30 to 12:30 in the Fairport Public Library. August 15th from 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. In Fairport Public Library. And then we do have the public hearing right now scheduled for that on September 8th at 6 p.m. here.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to ask for a motion by the Village Board to enter into executive session to discuss proposed pending or current litigation, collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of Civil Service Law and the employment history of a particular individual. Can I have that motion and second, please?
So moved.
Was that you? Yeah. Okay, Trustee Mishler.
Second.
Trustee Briggs. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? That will be unanimous. So for anyone joining us live online, we will enter an executive session. We will conduct our business that falls under these guidelines. We will come out and end the meeting. There will not be any other formal business today, just the action of coming out and ending the meeting. So thank you for joining us. Whether you were live or whether you join us online or after the fact, we appreciate your attention at these meetings, and we are going to move into executive session.